For years, I've been saying, hello, everybody. Welcome to Candid Frank Live's Leaf Talk with Aaron William Freeland. And for the past few years, for many years, actually, because it's been a constant and it's something that I think because the league can get away with it every year, it gets a tiny, tiny bit worse every playoff whenever the Leafs are involved in the playoffs. By tiny bit worse, I mean a tiny bit worse. They ignore penalties they can give to another team, that look fractionally equal to the ones they give to the Leafs. This year, it's gone into a different world where we can actually see in the same game, not 2 games ago, not a week ago, not a year ago, we can go in minutes during a game, watch a play that is definitely a penalty, and in some cases, identical, and not a penalty, not a suspension. And now we see, after about, I guess there were about 5 or 6 of these this playoff of Leaf players eating the boards. We watched Nylander have a door open for him, helping him to basically end up in the bench of the Florida Panthers. We've seen Marner eat an elbow. We've seen suspendable offenses by Florida. If you look at it from the perspective of intent to injure, if that has any context in giving a suspension, we've seen at least a half dozen of them in this series that Florida has gotten away with. Not only suspension lists, penalty lists. And last night, the NHL dropped the hammer on Ty Domi's son for, at the end of the game, committing a foul and costing him a $5,000 fine. The only time, I believe, in this series, has there been a suspension in this series, Aaron?
Not yet.
Has there been a fine in this series? I think there was a $3,500 one, wasn't there?
There may have been in one of the earlier games, but
I don't remember 100%, but that could be another game, another series. My point is, like every playoff series that we've seen the past few years, and I love it because I have Aaron here, who a few years ago was going, well, I don't know if it's really like that, Frank. And now all of a sudden, Aaron's preaching from my Bible. And it's scary because I got a phone call from a good friend of mine that's in the business. And he says to me, Frank, you know what? You're right. The referees in the league are trying to hammer Toronto. I said, I know I'm right. I've known I've been right for years because I understand the game. I watch the game. I devour it. And everything I've seen goes against common sense. So now that I've set that up and made my point, Aaron, am I lying about the fact that your opinion of what's gone on has gotten closer to what I said years ago than it was then and is now? Am I exaggerating?
It's certainly shifted. And the thing is, there seem to be certain referees that don't enjoy officiating games with the Toronto Maple Leafs in them. In particular, there's one referee who shall remain nameless, but in games where he's officiated and the Maple Leafs have been playing, the Leafs are now 0-10. Like, it's one of those situations where it's like 0-5, I can see. I can understand 0-5, but 0-10 is a little bit ridiculous.
No, you can't. You can't look at 0-5 and say there's nothing going on. The very least, what you can say is that's a weird coincidence. That's a weird fact.
Look, there are interpersonal relationships at play for some of these, and we know that certain referees didn't like certain coaches. And the perception was that once that particular coach was gone, the issues would fix themselves. But as it turns out, that's really not the case. The issues have been just as bad, and it's puzzling to me how this particular referee, especially being as bad as he is, continues to get games. I mean, I get it. He has a personality. He's mildly entertaining, but at the same time, 0-10 is you got to look at that and you got to think to yourself, man, like that doesn't work, you know.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And Bissonnette on Spit and Chicklets has hung the goat collar around Mitch Marner. And I've always been a little. I don't mean to be critical. I like to think that I've been constructively critical. I try to be constructively critical, but even in the attempt to be constructively critical, we can at times go over the top. And I can tell you, sitting on the outside, listening to Bissonnette talk about Marner and how terrible he was on the power play, how he made a terrible pass, I totally agree with him. But you know what? Last night, and the implications that he doesn't try and that kind of stuff. I don't think that's the issue. And I also don't think an old issue of his was he this is a terrible thing to say, but I just blatantly say it just to make the point because it moves past this point. Blatantly fearful of the contact that's available in the playoffs because it's so excessive. He's a little bit hesitant in the way he plays the game. What I can say is I don't look at Marner as him making mistakes and people should hold him accountable. I look at Marner and who he was and who he is this playoff. I saw him actually lay a hit on a Florida Panther, a real hit, like not the excuse me hit that he's done time and time again. I saw him really go into a guy, which to me says something very important. It says to me he's trying to change. And you need him to change, not because of him being Marner, but because of him playing so much time on the ice, and the physical nature of the Maple Leafs needs to be there. If it isn't there, then they're just seceding on that part of the game, which they cannot do.
And you look at the time on ice and everything like that, and you look at how he's played the past few games. He, in the past 2 games, has not had a shot on goal. And that is an issue for the Maple Leafs because he has a wrister. He has a one-timer. He spent a lot of time during the summer working on that. It's been impressive when he's actually used it. Almost had his head removed by Kulikov. Again, not called, no supplementary discipline. You could tell he was shaken by it. But he's got to do more. Unfortunately, I know it's easy for us as fans to just sort of sit back and say, hey, well, such and such and yada yada. But he had 22 minutes and 10 seconds on the ice on Sunday night. No power play goals, no shots. Steven Lorentz had 2 shots. Matty Nyes had 3. And you look at the shot distribution here. Nylander had 4. Tavares had 5. But at the same time, they're not getting what they need.
Either.
It's they wasted they wasted a dynamite performance by Joseph Woll. He was rocking a 940 plus save percentage last night, and they couldn't get him anything.
No.
And they had power plays. Like it's not like everything was called against them. Wow.
They had 8, 2 maybe.
They kind of. I think that the problem is
it really counts
3.
because
wow,
because he had they had the whatever. Anyway, at the end of the day, Aaron, what you're saying is what I've said all along has been wrong with the Maple Leafs core 4, and that is that and now I believe Nylander has basically. I think he's convinced all of us. Anybody, a reasonable thinker, will say that he doesn't cower from the tough play and he produces within playoff pressure, right? He's established that he can do that, for goodness sake. So has Tavares. Unfortunately, the 2 top players in the core 4 are unable to produce in these key games. I'm not at this time, like I said, I want to repeat, I'm not complaining about a lack of improvement from season to season by Marner. I'm not complaining about a lack of improvement for the captain either. My problem with Matthews is I think he's injured because I don't think he can shoot the puck straight. I go back to those 2 empty nets that he missed from over the blue line, just past the blue line. Hey, look, I could see a lot of players missing that shot, but I don't see Matthews missing that shot. Not a guy who can pick corners and has a wrister like, one that helped him get, 60 goals? I mean, there's something wrong with him. And you know what? I don't blame him for that. That's not his fault. But at the end of the day, the Leafs are relying on him to score, and he's not doing much. And here's the thing. The Florida Panthers have Tkachuk on their team, whom they rely on for goals and for a certain standard of play, which he can't deliver because he's injured. My point being that a guy like Marner, if he's healthy, that's when it bothers you even more, because if people realize that Matthews is hurt, he gets a little bit of a break. But now all you got left is Marner that's not holding up his end. If you buy into the Matthews being hurt, because hey, Nylander and Tavares are doing their thing. They're doing they're getting what they're doing what they're paid for to score goals. So that's why Marner is the focus. But what I will say about this is the thing that Aaron, that bothers me more than anything. And that is that you're asking players, star players, guys who are not the physical type of players, to be involved in a game where you're playing opponents who have a blank check to hurt you, An elbow to the head is the definition of hurting a player. An elbow to the side of the head is a definition of hurting a player. So a cross check in the mouth is the definition of hurting a player. And having said that, those 3 definitions were not penalized in this series against Leafs. Tell me, Aaron, you're human. How hard would it be for you to play under those conditions? You're welcome, Marner. You're welcome, Matthews. And you're welcome, the rest of the core 4 and the Maple Leafs.
You know what? Honestly, in a situation like that, I would be very hard put not to retaliate. But at the same time, I have enough tools in my toolbox to figure out a way to get back at them. I don't endorse dirty play. That's never been my style as a player. But, the boys have to do something. And, I mean, Pacioretty was leading the team with hits. He had 8 hits in the last game.
37-year-old.
Yeah, 37-year-old dude is throwing the body around like he's 22 again. Austin Matthews had 4 hits. That was a bit of a surprise. Matty Nyes is a bulldog. He had 6. But when the NHL is allowing these players, especially the core 4, just to get carved on, and there's no significant physical pushback. A lot of social media I saw last night was, hey, look, guys, they're not calling anything. They are giving you carte blanche to do what you need. So why aren't you?
No, they're not. Okay. I'm down the road here with this, what's going on with the Leafs, what you're seeing now, and you're obviously sure now what you're seeing. I've been sure for a while, and I've run all the theories that we're talking about here through my head, and I've come to the conclusion, and I said it last year, and I'm going to go back to it again this year. It's not on the Leafs. This is not on the team. It's not on the coach. It's on the organization. Clearly, there is something wrong with the way the officiating's going. And, there was once a shot of Neely on the guy that was the GM. I think he still has some vice president of the Bruins on the phone, screaming and yelling at the National Hockey League and saying, hey, they crippled our captain. And he was yelling at the top of his lungs. They showed it on TV that he was yelling and screaming, upset. And they confirmed it was him talking to the National Hockey League. this is what's missing, I think, from the Toronto Maple Leafs, who like to be a good corporate citizen, which I understand. But at some point, Aaron, I'm sorry, the players, if they have you not noticed, have you not seen that when the Leafs retaliate, they get penalized? So now you know that that's a dry well. You can't get any water out of that. So the only thing left to do is to have ownership step in and say, look, we're not putting up with this. And I would like to see, this is crazy, but I would like to see Shanahan have a press conference, eat a $1 million fine from the National Hockey League, and basically just saying, we're getting screwed and I'm tired of it. And we owe it to our fans to speak on their behalf, and just leave it at that. And then have a feeding frenzy from the media, who will now have an open opportunity to look into the facts of the case. And what's going to happen is all those videos that we've seen will be compiled and put together, and somebody will say, oh, you're just showing the Leaf side. But then the media can say, well, listen, show us Florida's side. See, because that's the problem. The problem is we're not making the National Hockey League accountable, because this is something that has been going on for years and years and years. So I suggested to Shanahan, I put a tweet onto him. I sent it to him. I'm meaningless to that guy, totally meaningless. I have no inside track on that guy. But I sent it to him and said, don't you think it's time, in various words, politely, not angrily, I think it's time for you to say something on behalf of your players and your coaches. You're seeing what I'm seeing. Say something. And at the end of the day, Aaron, that's where we're at right now. If the Leafs are going to get decent officiating, they got to call it into question while it's clear right now, while it's happening right now. Try to save this series by saying, you know what? You cost us a goalie. Like all the stuff that he could point out is sitting there waiting for him. It's teed up for him. Show some backbone, show some spine, and stand up to the National Hockey League. And I don't think ownership's going to be too angry when they get a fine of like $1 million for him saying something negative. I think he has to do it, and the media will get an opportunity to judge what he said, and they will have the opportunity to say something, show something, and like what's happened with the National Hockey League over the years. I've said it before, and this rant is still going, and I'll say it again. They don't care about being decent. When it comes to women, they had to get dragged. They had to have the fear of court coming at them to do that. Children, they've had that under Harold Ballard. They've had players being abused physically, and there was some sexual problems that also happened. Now, let me tell you, what did it take for the National Hockey League to clean up their act? They had to be dragged into the public where they couldn't hide behind no comment, which is what they do when it comes to the penalties, when it comes to the suspensions. They just say, he's got a penalty, and then they draw the curtain back closed and wait for the fire to subside. Rant complete.
And a lot of folk have been calling for something like this for years. They've been calling for the NHL to do something like the NBA's 2-minute drill, where they point out officiating mistakes and stuff that they missed. And press have been calling for referees to be made available to explain themselves after games for years. But the NHL is secure in their own, for lack of a better term, crapulence, and they're content to wallow in it. They don't care. As long as the money keeps coming in, as long as as long as fans keep going to games, they just don't care. And it's been that way since Gary took over. Canadian teams get short shrift. Issues that need to be addressed, in particular with officiating, especially when it comes to player injuries, never get touched, because hockey is sacrosanct. We can't do that. It's a different season when you start playing the playoffs. We can't use the same. I know.
That's
Trust
all.
me, I know.
I wrote. Sorry, Aaron.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will. I wrote a little thing today on Facebook, and I laid out the historical way the Maple Leaf fans have been short shrifted. and Canadian fans have been short shrifted. I'll tell you a little piece of it, okay? And here's why I don't believe in the National Hockey League being a fair practicer. All right, I don't see them as a fair practitioner. Okay, and here's my proof. I got a bunch of them, but this is the one I'm going to narrow down to. Okay, there was a team called the Quebec Nordiques and a team called the Winnipeg Jets. There's one now, but there was a Winnipeg Jets before, and the Winnipeg Jets and the Nordiques both were yanked. The Winnipeg Jets were yanked out, sent to Phoenix, to Arizona, right? And they went to that town because the Winnipeg wasn't supporting the team. They didn't have a major league arena because their seats only like 16,000, whatever, 14,000, whatever it was at the time. The Nordic, the same thing. They didn't have a decent arena, and they yanked that team, shipped them to Colorado. The next year, after they shipped them to Colorado, ironically, the Pepsi Arena, they won a Stanley Cup to the chagrin of all the Nordique fans, I'm sure, and I remember how upset they were. Now we've got a team that went from Winnipeg to Phoenix, Arizona Coyotesville, right? Did that team have a problem with attendance?
Huge.
Did that team have a problem with ownership? Something the other two teams didn't have. Did that team have a problem with their arena? They ended playing in a freaking 3,000 person arena. That was the final embarrassment that the NHL could take. And in fact, ownership was taken over by the NHL. And how long did it take to turn that team into Utah?
Yeah, it didn't take long at all. You know, and once the owner kept shooting his mouth off in public and shooting himself in the foot with, fake land auctions.
It took 10 years to get rid of literally a shitty team, a shitty situation that they had. They called what was in Quebec a shitty situation in their own words, and they called Winnipeg, the Jets, the original Jets, a shitty situation. All it was there were two organizations that need a little more time to convince themselves or find a way to find the money to get a decent arena. They were not given the same kind of consideration that Phoenix was. Why? The two ones that lost their teams were in Canada, and the one in the U.S. got all kinds of extra string. They got all kinds of cooperation. If you think that's a coincidence, folks, you're foolish. You're foolish, and you can't read the tea leaves. So, that's why back then and even till now, I'm upset on behalf of fans in Canada. I root for all the Canadian teams. I'm hoping against hope that two Canadian teams can meet in the Stanley Cup final just out of spite. It's not even because I want them to get in there, just out of spite, just to look at Gary Bettman and this National Hockey League that wants to have two American teams in the final because it'll get them more money, they think, right? Because that's what it's about. It's about money, Aaron. That's all this is. It's all about money.
And the team that went back into Winnipeg was another one that was out of a hockey town that shouldn't have had hockey.
Twice.
Yeah, well,
twice. We're talking about Atlanta, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So you know what? At the end of the day, this is Canada's game. It's the game that we love and care about, but we're treated like garbage by the National Hockey League. The biggest city in the country, Toronto, their fans are treated like garbage, and it's no longer a close problem. It's bordering on so obvious it's ridiculous.
Well, and that's the problem. They can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, it happens so much, but it is what it is. Aaron, the other thing you were talking about, the like I said, they're not going to be able to fight back because, unfortunately, in my opinion, they'll just get more penalties and it'll just end up, the Leafs are going to have the kind of characters. I'll finish by saying this. The kind of people the Leafs need playing for them, they really need the kind of players they really need, which I've come to the realization is the only thing, which is why I kept talking about toughness. The team the Leafs need, the players they need that make that team have to be willing to take a lot of crap. because they can't fight back because they'll get a penalty. They can't fight back in kind because they'll get a penalty. They can't fight back less than the opposition because they'll still get a penalty. Am I making my point clear? They don't stand a chance, Aaron. The Leafs have to, the kind of people they need playing for them are the kind of guys that'll eat shit and spit out roses. That's the kind of team they need.
Well, there's still time in this series. It's now a best of 3. We're coming back to Toronto. We've got home ice advantage. So far, the Leafs haven't lost at home. So that is the one small consolation I have out of all of this. Whatever is happening with the boys, because they looked beat down on Sunday when they played. They did not look like they were having any fun at all. Wondering if maybe there isn't something going around the dressing room.
Yeah, it's called we're tired of the officiating ish.
Well, here's the thing, though. Berube's done something like this before. If you recall, when St. Louis won the Cup, he basically came out and said, "Hey, guys, what are you doing?"
No. Hey, look, Aaron. By that I meant I didn't mean it as I meant it to say. What I'm saying is that this team, right, had a bad start with so many penalties. That's all I'm saying. They were deflated because they couldn't get the game going. Did they deserve the penalties? Yeah, for the most part, they did. No question. They were penalties. It's just that we saw other stuff that could have been penalties, and unfortunately, they were wearing the wrong jersey. That's all. And they're frustrated. And this is what I mean about they need players who can eat shit and spit out roses. That's what they need. Unfortunately, that's where Marner, that isn't one of Marner's strengths. He's a good weather. And this is not gosh, I don't want this to sound like a terrible criticism of the kid. It's not a criticism. It's just an identification of his personality and the type of player he is. He's just not the kind of guy that plays well in the middle of a lot of shitty hockey. He's a freewheeler. He's let me show you my talent, right? But in the playoffs, talent isn't as relevant. And that's the problem.
Yeah, and a lot of the playoffs is a lot of clutch and grab. It is the old trap. It is the old basically old school what hockey was that we were trying desperately to get away from, to let the players play.
Aaron, if you do this on the ice, what happens?
If I'm Nazem Kadri, I get 3 games. However, if I'm a Tkachuk brother and I happen to play for a team in one of the Sunshine States, nothing.
And if I threaten a player, and there's verbal proof that he threatened a player,
nothing.
Oh, it depends who.
Well, no, I mean, if you're playing for an American team, it's not going to happen.
And that's my beef. And that's why I'm saying, how does a kid like one of the best hockey players ever to play the game, like Mitch Marner, when it comes to playing pond hockey, there's no one better. The unfortunate thing is that he's not getting a chance, to play pond hockey, and he doesn't feel safe on the ice. And he rightfully, I'm not asking you to believe me when I say this, folks. I'm not asking him to admit this, but he's playing with unnecessary fear. Unnecessary fear is brought on by a league and the officials that offer a blank check to the opposition to take your head off and not award a penalty. That, my friends, is not sportsmanship. That's coercion into losing. And that is losing through threats, which were verbally sent across from one to Nylander. And those verbal threats have turned into actual physical threats. So I'm dying to see, wrong word. I'm waiting to see, Aaron, and what's important to me is I'm waiting to see how the Leafs come out at home. I'm waiting to see how well the fans do. I know we're running over, Aaron. If you want, we can call it. I'm waiting to see how they come out, and I'm waiting to see the reaction of the fans to the referees. I'm waiting to see what happens there. And most of all, I'm hoping Leaf management has the balls to stand up on behalf of their players, because somebody has to. At some point, The rules are not something the players can change. They can only play by them. They're not going to change the rules. Whatever the league sends out there and calls the rules, players have to play under those rules. They can't change them.
Well, in case you'd like to know, by the way, Rodriguez has not been ruled out for Game 5, but he hasn't been cleared to play. After that devastating drive-by hit that he took, I thought he would never come out of his coma.
Aaron,
I've taken worse bumps than that in warm-up. This is absolutely garbage.
Let's be clear. It was interference. Let's be clear.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. That it was definitely interference. But
we've seen a lot of interference in this series, and it was interference. But if we're defining the hit alone, just the hit, measuring what kind of hit it was a clean hit. It was basically a shoulder into the chest with a bend down by the player. All right. It wasn't a jump in the air, throw your elbow in the air and hit Marner in the back of the head. And he never came near his head. And the first thing he did was he went to the ice and grabbed his head. The same thing that players used to do but are fined for now because they review a high stick. If a player fakes a high stick, Aaron, they get fined if they fake a high stick. When a player does this, and then you see the replay, and we've seen that with the stick is about that far away from the guy's head, right? And essentially, that's what this guy did. He's a phony. He's a fake. He's a disgrace. But he's playing for the right team.
Exactly. He's got the right colors on.
Yeah. So it is what it is. And if you looked at the head, folks, the head was not even close to being contacted. He landed on the ice, and then he grabbed his head like somebody almost took it off. Yeah, it's not very good. So, Aaron, the Leaf team, technically, what do they have to do? We've got a couple of days here because we're going to come back on Wednesday again before the game, right? So,
yep.
This past game, you've mentioned probably the biggest and most important component to the loss is that they looked defeated. So they had a chance in this game. They had a couple of really good chances around the net when they finally decided to shoot the puck at the net, but they didn't hit the net, right? They had opportunities. How much of that do you think was the goaltender?
I'll be honest with you. I think Bobrovsky doesn't get a lot of the credit that he's due because of the team that he plays behind. Florida's very tight defensively. They're very good at what they do in funneling shots off. They're very good at blocking shots in front. They're very good in generating and clearing rebounds from in front of the net. Max Domi had a really good opportunity at the side of the net. Unfortunately, couldn't get that through. Matty Nyes shot high on a breakaway, shorthanded. Again, these are all things that Nylander had an opportunity. Harassed from behind, probably should have been an interference call. Again, nothing. But, regardless of that, they at least need to get more shots on. 23 shots in a game isn't going to cut it. Especially not when there's 37 coming the other way.
Well, if everybody who's watched the playoffs so far this year, there's one thing that we've learned. The pretty goals aren't the order of the day. The garbage, unexpected, like you talk about unexpected goals or expected goals. They have a statistic for that. I think the unexpected goals are being scored more than the expected ones in this playoff series. And I highlight it this way. From distance, at about 2 or 3 barely staying in the air, shots, right, that are barely staying there. How many have we seen fluttering pucks end up in the back of the net? How many of those have we seen? How many goals have we seen along the ice between the goalie's pad and the post? You don't expect that in the butterfly era, right? You don't expect those kinds of goals. And the Leafs are not playing playoff hockey, and they're not shooting playoff shots. You just throw it. Look what happened with 0.34 seconds left in the Edmonton game. Look what happened there. Leon Draisaitl, one of the greatest scorers in the National Hockey League, put one in his own net with 0.34 seconds in the game. That shot was going across the front of the crease. It was nowhere headed towards the inside of the net. I don't think so anyway. I don't know.
No, from where I was sitting, it didn't look like it would have gone in. If he had not have touched it,
Just
it
had
would
to
have
let
been
it go.
Yep.
But because the fear of somebody being there on the other side and fearing there was enough time on the clock, that, my folks, my friends, is a third of a second. They scored with a third of a second left, as close to a 33rd of a second you can get anyway. So that's what's important here. What the Leafs didn't do in this past game is they didn't shoot the puck at the net. They crowded the net. They did a good job of that. And the other thing they didn't do well, as far as I'm concerned, Aaron, they need to come up with a plan to stop the two men. They explained it on one of the Hockey Night broadcasts, and I actually started to see it, how the Florida Panthers send in two guys into one corner, whether it's on the side or at the corner. And the Leafs are having a hard time combating that. They're going to have to come up with a plan on how to break up, the board play that the Florida Panthers, at least in Florida, displayed and were successful at.
100%. They have to find a way to combat the forecheck, and this is again part of adapting in real time. It's one of the things that Keefe got criticized for a lot, was not making defensive adjustments mid-game. And I don't know if Berube's falling into the same trap. I know that it's difficult to do when you have second change to get the players out there, but at the same time, these guys are pros. They should be able to read and adapt on the fly, and it doesn't seem like they're doing that. And that is a whole bunch of problems.
And the next thing that I'll point out is momentum. Now, after that game, during that game, they gathered momentum and they had all the momentum. Let's face it, Florida had the momentum. It doesn't matter why. We can whine and bitch and complain about, why, they had a better advantage. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is they got momentum. The good news for the Leafs is there's an extra day off right now. Yeah. So that momentum will it'll fade a little bit, right? So that momentum won't be as important. And secondarily, the most important thing I can say is that the coach has to make a decision about his lineup. And he doesn't have to make it overnight, literally. He doesn't have to make it overnight. He can have a full day of just thinking about it. The organization can talk about it. And I think, Aaron, I'm not sure they're going to come up with any changes. I think they might roll out the same guys.
No, they may just try to run it back again and see how the game goes. The problem that you have then is you're going back to Florida for Game 6. And what are you going to do then?
I get it, but I would make one change. Just one change, one that you would like.
Robertson?
Yeah, for Järnkrok.
You know what? I'm not upset by that. Putting Robertson on the right wing with Lawton and Lawrence might be the right thing to do.
He has fresh legs, Aaron. They need fresh legs.
And the other thing that you need to consider as well is, do you want to put in a deterrent?
I know the temptation for the deterrent is there, but I do know with the way the reffing works against the Leafs in the playoffs, any pushback by the Leafs will be penalized. There won't be an advantage to doing that. It's I've seen it. It's fool's gold. I saw it with Domi way back then. I saw it with who am I thinking of now? Like I said, Hyman. I saw it with Hyman. I've seen it with a lot of players who said, you know what, I can hit you the same way and I can punish you, and do it. And then they get suspended for 3 games. No, the Leafs can't do that. Not under the circumstances they live under. The rules that they live under don't allow them to do that. It's a trap. It's a trap that the other team's going to benefit from, because the league's going to clamp down on the Leafs.
So Järnkrok out, Robertson in. That's
all I do.
Make at right wing.
I think that's all I would do. I would just put Robbie in there. And put him in there and say, okay, kid, here's your chance to show us what you can do. And I think his fresh legs will at the very least draw some penalties, and maybe you put him on the power play.
There are worse ideas that have been floated for this team. So, it's entirely a possibility. I'm not entirely opposed to letting him draw in.
They need a tad of energy to be upped. They need an uptick of energy. you said what you said tells me that you know what I mean, that they need energy because they looked kind of deflated, right? And he would help raise the level of the fans, getting excited watching him skate around there and stuff. So I don't know. I just think they need something. But if they want to go with the robots, because essentially that's what this lineup is, the one they have is the robot lineup. It's the coaches perfect lineup of guys that will do what they're supposed to do. But I'm just wondering if a little ingenuity might help, just a little spigot of ingenuity, and see how that affects things for the Leafs. That's what I would like to see.
Well, the good news is they've got 48 hours to try to get it all figured out. They've got 48 hours to try to figure out who's coming off the bench for them in this next iteration of the Leafs playoff lineup. So Robertson has always performed well the game after being benched.
You've always wanted to bring him in. I'm not saying
have.
something that you're not, like, I don't know that you would be interested in. I know you're interested in that.
No, I definitely would like to see that. So,
well, let's see what happens. It'll be interesting. And we do know something else about Robertson. His first game back, usually pretty good.
100%.
And I think they need his first game back because I think the series, obviously, in my opinion, hangs on this game. The Leafs, there's nothing other than winning at this game. They got no other option. They have to win here. They don't want to go back to Florida facing elimination.
No, that is exactly the wrong position to be in for this squad. And if they go back to Florida looking down the barrel of elimination, it's not going to end well. You know what? Ideally, I'd love to see them take a game in Florida. I'd love to see it only go 6. My buddy has tickets for Game 7. It's possible.
All they have to do is win this game, and then you and I can talk about the next game. But win this, nothing else matters. This is the only game that should be on their mind. This is the only game that the coach and the players should be thinking about. This is the game they need to win. This one right here. Number 7. They have to win number 7. They got to get that 7th win. That's what they got to do. End of story. We can talk until we're blue in the face about what happens next. But without knowing what happens after what happens next, knowing what happens next is what's most important. You get the closing words, Aaron. How happy? How do your last words on words of I guess that might make Leaf fans happy, or from a Leaf fan's perspective? What are your final words and closing the door on what happened last night?
Guys, it's been up and down. We know it's been up and down. We've seen this before. We've seen great performances followed by terrible performances in the playoffs. The series is now starting at 0. It's a best of 3. We have home ice advantage. I believe in my heart of hearts that the boys can bring it home, but I'm also ready to be hurt again. So let's get this cracking on Wednesday and see what we can see.
That's standard fare for Maple Leaf fans. That's why I stopped being a Maple Leaf fan when Ballard didn't sign Keon. So I go back to that for as a fan. I'm still a Toronto fan. I love Toronto. I love Canada. I'll support every city in this town when it comes to the National Hockey League. We hope it works out. Edmonton looks good. Winnipeg looks and Toronto looks all in differing amounts. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. You can follow us on Candid Frank Stanisci on 10:30 on YouTube. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Appreciate your attention. Enjoy the games coming up. There'll be some good games tonight as well because playoff hockey is so exciting.